Hey all you heroes and champions, crows, pirates, and inquisitors. Welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast. I'm Shelby.
And I'm Austin.
And we are so excited to bring you this podcast. Every episode we'll be talking about a different topic in the Dragon Age universe. From the Maker to Lyrium to Aravels, we will cover it all. There will be spoilers. And always remember, swooping is bad.
Yeah, you ready to dive into some Dragon Age?
I'm always ready to dive into Dragon Age.
All right. Well, we've got a very, very full topic today, I will say.
Yes, for sure.
Lots of things to talk about. So last week we did our discussion on the Maker and dove into the Chant of Light and like really what is behind the Maker and all of that. But the Chantry and the Maker are not the only religions that exist in Thedas. And so today, I thought we could talk about the elves. As you both know, we both, really love our elven mages. Or my elven rogue, I guess, is the first elf I played. And so there's this whole history behind them that is also kind of shrouded in this mystery, same way as the Maker is. Mm-hmm. And again, it's one of those things you wouldn't quite notice unless you really dove into the Codex or the extra game material. Mm-hmm. And so I think we could start by maybe just getting a little overview of the Elven pantheon.
Yes, so I can do that. I also think it's important to say that the Elven history that we're going to talk about is like thousands of years before the Chantry, before Tevinter, before Andraste, like almost 10,000 years is the dating. So it's like way, way before. I'm not really sure of the dating on the Dwarven culture, but the elves are one of the oldest, if not the oldest culture and religion in Thedas. So I think that's important to note.
Definitely.
That we know about, of course. So the Elven pantheon is called the Evanuris. And that's the first pantheon, the one that I would not classify them as good, but I would classify them as recognized. And then there is another pantheon called the Forgotten Ones, and that name kind of speaks for itself, but we'll get into it. So the Evanuris are composed of 8 different gods, and the first 2 are seen as like the All-Mother and the All-Father. And if you've played Inquisition, you can probably guess who the All-Mother is. But the All-Father is called Elgar'nan. He is seen as one of the creators of the world. He is the All-Father, the eldest of the Sun, S-U-N. He is also the god who overthrew his father, and now is seen as the god of vengeance. So, he's not very nice. He also is the one who enslaved a bunch of elves and created the Valisleen, which are the face tattoos. And if you played Inquisition as a Elven Inquisitor, I'm not sure if it's just linked to people who romance Solus or not. I think it might be. But regardless, Solus is the one that tells you, hey, these markings are like to signify you as a slave. So do you want to remove them? And he offers to remove them for you. So Elgar'nan is the one that created the tattoos, and he's the one that enslaved all the elves. So I found a citation on the Dragon Age wiki that says, ancient elves would not call on Elgar'nan to deliver justice, for his fury would destroy all it touched. And I thought that's really interesting compared to the counterpart to Elgar'nan, which is Mythal. So Mythal is seen as the All-Mother. She's a goddess of love and justice, and they very much see her as a protector. And they still do. There's still like lots of statues of Mythal around all over the place. So Mythal is protective and fierce, and she brings motherly kindness to Elgar'nan's destructive anger. One of the Codex entries in Trespasser says that Mythal has struck down the pillars of the earth and rendered the earth their demesne unto the elves. I think that's interesting because in another Codex, it says that pillars of the earth are a synonym for titans. So I know we dove into those conspiracy theories last time about the Maker being a Titan, and Elgar'nan being the Maker. So it's just interesting to have this quote about Mythal striking down a Titan who could be the Maker, who could be like Elgar'nan, who she also has conflict with. I just think that's a really interesting prospect. I don't know if it's going to be accurate or not, but we'll see. Anyway.
If I could just interject a little. Just one thing that I noticed is, like, again, we're talking about, one of the theories talked about that Elgar'nan is the Maker, and you also have Mythal, or Andraste, is another incarnation of Mythal, just as Flemeth is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that it's interesting here that we get another kind of parallel, like, the Maker is almost seen as like this vengeful, like fear-driven deity who renders judgment onto creation.
And so is Elgar'nan. Like they're the same.
Yeah, and then Mythal is very similar to Andraste in that Andraste does take this kind of motherly figure in chantry practice and the ideas of justice and other things about that, especially if you really, in DA Origins and Inquisition, if you really dive into these conversations with Liliana, like in her understanding of who Andraste is and what she fights for, it very much lines up with what Mythal represents.
That's really interesting. So, we probably, most of us know the story of Mythal dying, but I'll just give us the short version. So Mythal was killed by her fellow elven gods in their lust for power. And in her time of need, she appeared to Flemeth, whose body she now possesses. And so the murder of Mythal is really what, like, drives Fen'Harel from the Evanuris. They were really, really close friends. And so we see throughout Thedas that the statues of Mythal very often appear alongside or near statues of Fen'Harel. And you can find that in some of the Codex entries, which I find interesting. So yeah, Mythal was and is still a huge source of hope and inspiration for the elves, and I think it's very similar to what we talked about last week, that the elves don't really worship Elgar'nan like then or now. Instead, they very much worship Mythal. They're the ones. Mythal is the one that is really revered in their culture. Even they're fearful of her at times because she's a god of justice. But I think she's really the deity that is most worshipped out of all of these.
That's so interesting because it always kind of stems from the fact because Flemeth herself has an interesting relationship with the Dalish in DA2. And just this kind of respect, and I can't remember the Dalish phrase that they refer to her as, but she has a name, And so that just was fascinating to me because of that kind of worship. And then again, we get this thing of like, there is like this masculine figure in the Elven pantheon and with the Maker, but really it's this feminine person that is worshipped and practiced.
Yeah, definitely. Also, her name is Asha Belinar.
Asha Belinar. Do you know what
Which means, it means woman of many years.
Ah, I see.
And I don't really know the answer to this question. You might, because you are the Dragon Age 2 simp. But who is, not who, do the Dalish know that Flemeth is Mythal?
That's what I was kind of getting to a point. Like, it's unclear to me if they actually know that she is Mythal. I would argue that the elves in the Arbor Wilds in Inquisition, they know Flemeth is Mythal.
Yeah, but they're not Dalish. They're ancient elves.
Right. I would also argue that no, because I think they sense some sort of kinship with Flemeth, but I don't know if I would say that they know. Because I think she's just become kind of a legend. Because I guess, and this is more kind of a question, like, is Flemeth the first person to host Mythal? I know we talked about Andraste, but like...
Yeah, I guess we don't really know the answer to that question.
Because Flemeth, you would know this because you have read more with Flemeth pre-Dragon Age Origins.
Uh-huh.
Like, when does she come into the picture? Does she know Andraste?
Who?
Flemeth.
Oh, no, I don't think so. So, I think Flemeth is born... Yeah, Flemeth is born in, like, the Towers Age.
Okay.
So that's way after Andraste.
So it could be... I mean, again, we don't really know... In the Ancient Age, does it say when Flemeth is killed?
When Flemeth is killed?
Or not Flemeth, Mythal. Sorry.
No, I can't. I couldn't find that date anywhere.
Okay, so we don't know. So there is this kind of thing, this thing about this elven kind of thing could have been happening near the same time as Andraste coming in.
No, it could not have. Because the way I understand it is, so back Elven history, like the Elven homeland of Elvenon, that's the Elven kingdom, the original one. It like was established like 8,000 years before the Ancient Age ends. So not even the Tevinter Imperium is around then. And so what kind of begins the fall of the kingdom is when humans start populating Thedas. And then Tevinter, by that point, they have become an Imperium, an actual threat, since Elvenon is over in that area of Thedas. They have the most conflict and the most tension with Tevinter. And so eventually Elvenon falls to Tevinter because of blood magic, always. So I know that happened way before Andraste and Mafarath went into Tevinter. I don't know the exact years because I don't really think there is an exact year for all of that. Some of it, yes, but not all of it. So I just don't think the dates line up for what you're trying to argue.
Right. I just wanted to stop and kind of unpack those because those are the two that we hear the most, other than Fen'Harel himself.
Yep. He's a whole other topic.
Yeah, so let's keep
You want
going.
me to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next two, they kind of go together, are Falandin and Dirthamen. And you'll remember Dirthamen because you can go to his temple in Dragon Age Inquisition. So Falandin and Dirthamen are twins. Falandin is the friend of the dead, the merciful one. And both Falandin and Dirthamen are the eldest children of Mythal and Elgar'nan. So Falandin is the god of death and fortune, and so basically what he does is he guides the dead into the beyond. And he was eventually banished with the rest of the Evanuris, and so now the Dalish bury their dead with an oak staff to keep them from faltering along the paths without their guide, who is Falandin. They often do, though, invoke Falandin on their deathbed or before like a journey where they don't think they'll come back from, and they do still refer to him as the merciful one. And I noticed this today when I was playing Inquisition. So his symbol is like the owl, and there is a huge owl statue in the Exalted Plains right outside of the very first camp that you come to. So, fun fact. So his brother, Dirthamen, is the god of secrets and knowledge. Dirthamen wandered aimlessly until he came across two ravens. "You are lost, and soon you will fade," the raven named Fear said to Dirthamen. "Your brother has abandoned you. He no longer loves you," said the other, named Deceit. "I am not lost, and Falandin has not abandoned me," replied Dirthamen. He subdued the ravens and bade them to carry him to Falandin. And that is from a Codex entry called Dirthamen, Keeper of Secrets. So the story goes, Falandin, he guides people into the Fade, and he spent a lot of time in the Fade. And obviously Dirthamen couldn't just follow him into the Fade because wasn't like of the Fade. And so these two ravens tried to trick him, but he outwitted the ravens with his knowledge, and got them to take him to his brother. So they reunited, and once they reunited together, they promised never to leave one another again. Legend also says that Dirthamen created the first Vartaral. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's that beast thing you fight in Dragon Age 2, right, Austin? Where you have to go into the woods. Do you remember this fight?
I do not. I'm sure if I look it up.
I'm
sure if I look it up, I'll remember.
Anyway, so Dirthamen is supposedly the one who created that creature. And then his symbols are ravens from that story, the bear, and the Vartaral. He is often pictured as a cloaked or kneeling figure. And I also forgot to mention Mythal and Elgar'nan symbols. Mythal, you might guess, her symbols are dragons and dragons in flight. And Elgar'nan symbols are fire, light, or lightning. So the next god, her name is Andruil. She is the goddess of the hunt, lady of fortune, or the goddess of sacrifice. She represents Dalish survival, and there's actually like a little message over her statue in the Origins Dalish camp that says that that's what she represents. I think that's really interesting. So Andruil taught elves to really respect the animals of the forest. She was a weapons crafter, and she hunted both mortals and animals. Andruil's chosen or beloved was a mortal elf named Gil'nan. Andruil transformed her into a Hala, elevating her to the godly rank. And so she is another one of the Evanuris gods. And if you remember in the Exalted Plains in Inquisition, there is an operation, and one of the areas is named, I think it's Gil'nan's Grove or Garden or something like that. But
also, the Golden Hala, they believe, is an incarnation of Gil'nan.
Oh,
that's what they say.
That's right, yes. Yeah, I had forgotten about that. They do. So, in The Masked Empire, which is one of the novels, Briala is in this book. So there's another character. His name is Felasan. So he tells Briala a story about Fen'Harel and Andruil. Andruil captured Fen'Harel for hunting the Hala without asking for her permission, right? So while captured, one of the Forgotten Ones, the evil gods, found Fen'Harel and Andruil and swore to kill Fen'Harel for his crimes against the Forgotten Ones. Andruil and Inaris, who's one of the Forgotten Ones, they decided to duel each other for the right to claim and punish Fen'Harel. But during the duel, of course, there's a but, Fen'Harel told Inaris about a flaw in Andruil's armor. Inaris exploited this flaw and stabbed her in the side. She then fell. While Fen'Harel and Inaris argued about the terms of Fen'Harel's imprisonment, Andruil shot Inaris in the back with her bow. They both fell and slumbered to heal themselves. While they were both asleep, Fen'Harel chewed through his ropes and escaped them both.
I like how they healed themselves by long resting.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. Isn't that interesting, though? Like,
yeah. Also, how does Felasan know this story? Like, he just found it? Or...
Okay, well, this is a major spoiler for the book, but he's an agent of Solus. So, I'm assuming that Solus told him.
Which is part of the whole, like, thing at the end of Inquisition where they say a bunch of, like, elven servants and other things just, like, left all of Thedas. And, like, it's implied that they were agents of Solus.
Yeah, exactly. So, Andruil she's the goddess of the hunt. She was obsessed with more and more challenging hunts. So, eventually she started to hunt the Forgotten Ones in the abyss, in the void, which drove her insane. And so, ultimately, Mythal had to challenge her, and she did, and she stole Andruil's knowledge of how to find the void, so she couldn't anymore. So again, Mythal playing that motherly role. So the symbols of Andruil are the hare or the hawk. Okay, so Siles is the next one. I always think that Siles is a girl. I don't. Oh no, Siles is a girl. Never mind. So Siles is the hearthkeeper or the goddess of the domestic arts. They pray to her for healing of the sick and to watch over innocents. Here's a fun fact. I was playing through DAI the other day, and in the side quest, Shallow Breaths, which is the quest where the mom is really sick and the dad finds you and asks you to go to his son at that like cult in the woods or whatever and get this medicine for the mom. And so when you do it and bring the medicine back, the dad, it says like praise Siles in response to you doing that for them. So that totally goes in line with they pray to her for the sick and to watch over innocent. I thought that was interesting. So Siles is the sister of Andruil. She is artistic, creative, as opposed to Andruil's aggressive hunter type. Let's see. Her name is always invoked before a fire is kindled and after it's quenched. And the Dalish sprinkle their Aravels with tree moss and ask that Siles protect them and everyone within. So there's also a rivalry between Siles and the other gods, which I find interesting. And a shrine of Siles exists in the Exalted Plains.
So, I guess, like, lore-wise, did these gods of the Evanuris, did they exist in the, like, material plane?
What is that?
Like, I know that, like, the Fade and, like, Thedas weren't necessarily as separated as they are in present Dragon Age.
Yeah.
But, like, did they reside in, like, Thedas? Like, the area around that? Like,
it is
so,
my
like,
understanding that they did.
So, like, it could be, like, when you go to the Exalted Plains, Dorian once remarks in Inquisition that it's hard to imagine that this place was once forest. Which part of that is part of the Exalted March, which we can get into later when we talk about just Elven history itself. So Celise, like this kind of Sile, sorry, I'm really bad at pronunciation. Everyone just forgive me. Could she have been, like, that had been her domain for that kind of thing, like where she resided, where like I guess that's kind of where I'm at, because the Maker and the Chantry kind of paints this kind of transcendent idea that he exists in a separate realm from, but a separate realm not only from Thedas but also from the Fade.
Yeah, like the Maker is transcendent above everything. I don't think that the same can be said for the Elven gods.
Yes. And because I think this is Trespasser spoilers, but when you go through the mirrors, the Alluvians, they tell you that that's
right.
Arlathan.
I think so. I haven't played Trespasser
right?
in
like
a long
that,
time.
I'm not misremembering
so
that.
I'm not totally for sure, but I think so, yeah.
Like, you walk, like, the parts that you're walking through when you're trying to get to the other parts are the ruins of Arlathan.
Arlathan is a real place, and we know it's a real place. Like, if you have the Tevinter Knights book, there's a map at the very beginning. The Arlathan Forest is on it. Like, it's close to Tevinter. It still exists. I'm pretty sure there is a... one of the short stories, or a couple of them, are set in the forest. So, like, yes, it's a real place. We knew it was a real place. Like, the history is there. Tevinter used blood magic to basically sink the city of Arlathan underground. So the forest still exists, but, like, it's not a civilization, so to speak. So, yes, we know that it was a real place where real elves existed and lived.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's a really big distinction between the gods of the Chantry and the gods of the elves.
Yes.
Did you have other questions?
No, not for that, so let's keep going. I think this is the one that you always get confused on their gender.
Yes. That's true. So, yes, the next god is definitely the one I always get their gender mixed up. June is the god of craft and building. I guess I just always assume he would be a goddess, because I guess I'm assuming crafting, like being crafty or whatever, which is dumb. Anybody can be crafty. So anyways.
Also,
God,
I think it's just because of June Carter.
That could also be. That's fair. Anyway, so June is the god of craft and building, and like making weapons and that kind of stuff. So there's a Codex entry called June, god of the craft, and this is what it says. We dedicate all our crafts to June, for it is he who taught the people to bend the branches of trees to make our bows, and to fashion coverings of furs and iron bark. Without June, would we have the Aravel or the harnesses for our Hala? So, there's a couple different stories about June. Some say that he's brother to Siles and Andruil, and then others say he is the husband of Siles, and then there's another legend that even says he created himself. So, a lot of mixed lore there.
It's a big power move.
I know, right? To create yourself. So very little is known about him, actually, and he appears the most seldom of all the elven gods in art, in literature, in legend, and in statues, which is kind of sad.
That's so interesting because often I'm just thinking about, I don't know many crafting in like the ancient pantheons and things, but like Hephaestus in Greek like mythology, he is also kind of like this outcast of the Olympian pantheon. Like, I mean, there's the whole story of Hera throws him, or Zeus throws him off the side of a mountain because he's ugly. And
so
other things like that. Are you laughing at that?
Oh my god. Yes. Sorry, I don't know anything about Greek mythology at all, so that was just kind of shocking.
Yeah, no, I'm not kidding. Like Zeus throws him off the side of the mountain, and there's other things. Rick Riordan in the Percy Jackson book says he takes a little liberty and says, "Oh, it was actually Hera who did that," and Hera herself promotes the story that Zeus did it to make herself look better.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but I just think that's interesting because it is this thing about gods of craft and building are often masculine, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then you have just this kind of idea that these crafters keep to themselves and don't really
don't have a lot of friends.
Yes. But joke is on Zeus because Hephaestus marries Aphrodite. So
okay. We're getting our lore mixed up.
sorry.
No, that's okay. That was really interesting, so thanks for sharing. But the last god of the Evanuris is Elgar'nan. I mentioned her earlier. She is the one that's made a god by Andruil. So she is the mother of the Hala, the goddess of guides and navigation. She was also a huntress of the people before she became a god. She was beloved and probably the best hunter of all of the people, which makes sense as to why Andruil would love her if Andruil is the god of the hunt. So Andruil raises her to transform her into the first Hala. And she is also, Elgar'nan is invoked by Dalish hunters when they can't find their way home. So she is often represented by the Hala or by a stallion. And then it's Elgar'nan's grove in the Exalted Plains. And then the last little bit of trivia that I have about Elgar'nan, this is fascinating to me. So, in the Frostback Basin in Dragon Age Inquisition, you can find out Inquisitor Ameridan built a shrine dedicated to both Elgar'nan and Andraste. And so there's a prayer that he prayed. It says, "As you were raised up from mortal men to stand with our creators, our makers, so raise me up now to defend this world."
That's so interesting.
Right, isn't it?
Because
isn't it?
It is just kind of like more poignant. And we talked about this the last episode, this idea that we feel that Dragon Age as itself is pushing us to this idea that they're all right.
Yeah.
They just don't have the full truth. But it also could point to the idea that Andraste, if Ameridan recognizes Andraste as an incarnation of Mythal.
Yeah, or even that Elgar'nan and the Maker are the same god.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll give you that.
Yeah. It's interesting too. Like it's also that's just a theme across religion. Like the creator god, the one who makes the world, tends to be the leader of a pantheon.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But yeah. So yeah,
that's true.
So that's 8. That's 8. Evanuris.
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm learning to say it.
You got it. You're good.
So we're moving.
Did you have any thoughts about the pantheon? generally?
Well, there are lots of parallels in that pantheon to actual other pantheons in the world. The main one is Norse. There's just a lot of parallels in that. The fact that Elgar'nan is called the All-Father.
Right, and Mythal, the All-Mother.
Yeah. And then
that's so Norse.
We'll get into this when we're talking about Fen'Harel. And we'll explain why Fen'Harel wasn't in that group to talk about. But, like, he is very obviously, like, kind of this parallel. He's kind of like Loki. And so there's just this kind of parallel with that. But I just think it's interesting that the chantry in their kind of thing, like, they don't need a deity of all of these different things because Andraste and the Maker fulfill that. Like, their blessing is what's going to do this, whereas you can kind of tell that the Evanuris either represent or evolve out of a need of the people.
See, I kind of disagree with you because I think that the legend, the cult of Andraste kind of evolves out of a need of the people. Like, yeah, okay, the Maker exists, but like, and we'll get into this the next episode when we talk about Andrastianism, but like, she's just a mortal person at the beginning who has a vision, and then she becomes this huge thing that transcends humanity, that transcends the mortal woman who had a vision, who led an army, who was murdered by her husband, you know? So
right, definitely. I think what I mean more is that the Elven pantheon arises, like, they represent a specific need of the community, whereas Andraste and the Maker are just kind of encompassing all deity.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so, like, of course, like, your hunters, they need the blessings of Andruil or Gillinan. Like, they need those blessings of that, and, like, this fear that no one really invokes Elgar'nan because he destroys everything.
Right.
And just interesting things like that. Just the differences that exist there. Even though we could talk about a lot of similarities that exist, there is definitely some distinct differences that I don't necessarily think are that reconcilable with Andrastianism.
Between the Evanuris and Andrastianism. I agree with that. Yeah. But I think that makes sense because that's how people are, right? Like, if you compare the Imperial Chantry in Tevinter with the Orlesian Chantry and the rest of Thedas, there are some major irreconcilable differences between those two. And the same can be said of any, like, religion and its denominations. Like, there are a lot of irreconcilable differences between Catholics and Protestants. There, you know, so on and so forth. So, anyway, we got off on a tangent a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that's an important, like, thing to say is that when we say that it's pushing that they're all right, we don't want to devalue, like, the differences that exist between them.
Right.
You know. So, there is another half of the pantheon, which I didn't really talk about, and it's going to be interesting because it's going to lead into a lot of things, but they're called the Forgotten Ones. And so we don't know a lot, so it'll be real quick, but let's just kind of get into it.
Yeah, so there's a couple important Codex entries. We'll get into that in a minute, but the Forgotten Ones are a mysterious group of elven gods who are like the opposite of the Evanuris. And as far as we know, they're composed of at least 3 gods, probably more, whose names have been lost to time or forgotten. But the ones that we know of are named Gelderon, Darnthal, and Anaris. Anaris was in that story I told earlier. So, where the creators are gods of justice, knowledge, and craft who seek to guide and protect the elven people, the Forgotten Ones are a dark mirror presiding over the worst aspects of existence: disease, terror, spite, and malevolence. They serve not as shepherds of the elves, but rather as figures of fear and dread. So, the creators, the Evanuris, are gods of good things, even if they themselves are not good. Whereas the Forgotten Ones are gods over the evil in the world.
And this is so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, it's very similar to when the Chant of Light talks about the spirits being corrupted with envy, hunger, all of that.
Oh, that's so true. I didn't even make that connection.
Yes. And so, again, we see these demon names popping up. Disease, terror,
spite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Figures of fear and dread. And so it's just really interesting. It's also interesting Solas's perspective on spirits, as he's the one who kind of points us into the direction that demons are just spirits whose ideals are corrupted.
Yeah.
And so I think that's interesting.
It is interesting. But the last thing I wanted to bring up about the Forgotten Ones is a Codex entry, again, from the Frostback Basin. There are so many interesting Codex entries from the Frostback Basin and the Descent, those DLCs, and even Trespasser. There's so many interesting lore aspects baked into the DLC, which always makes me suspicious. But anyway, so this is a Codex entry called Gelderon's Claim. And remember, Gelderon is one of the Forgotten Ones. So it's as if Gelderon is speaking. This is what it says. There are no gods. There is only the subject and the object, the actor and the acted upon. Those with will to earn dominance over others gain title not by nature, but by deed. I am Gelderon, and I refuse those who would exert will upon me. Let Andruil's bow crack, let June's fire grow cold. Let them build temples and lure the faithful with promises. Their pride will consume them, and I, Forgotten, will claim power of my own, apart from them until I strike in mastery.
Wow.
Right? What a sick burn.
Yeah. It's also interesting because I believe, and you could correct me on this, when we talked about the Forgotten Ones, like us together, it is also said that the Forgotten Ones whisper to the elves in dreams.
Oh, yeah.
Which is very similar to what it says that the old gods do. You know, in this thing, in hushed whispers, they reach out to the people or whatever.
Yeah.
Things like that.
That's true. So that's the Forgotten Ones. It's kind of sinister.
Yeah. It's definitely this kind of, and again, that's a Norse kind of idea, because you have the gods of Asgard, and then you have the Vanir. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I'm not sure, which are just kind of lesser gods and are kind of looked down upon by the gods of Asgard.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the Forgotten Ones are lesser. I just think that I feel like, and I don't really know what like they used to be gods of, but it very much seems to me as like, oh, they're gods that they got rejected by the people. They're not worshipped anymore. They like the elves, the ancient elves forsook them in favor of these new gods. That's how it reads to me.
They're forgotten.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so I didn't mention Fen'Harel, and there's a reason for that. Solas Mancers out there, don't be mad at me. I'm coming back around to him. The reason I didn't mention him before is because he is actually the only god who is considered to be a part of both groups. He is part of the Evanuris and the Forgotten Ones. There's a Codex entry from Fen'Harel, the Dread Wolf, that says, in ancient times, only Fen'Harel could walk without fear among both our gods and the Forgotten Ones. For although he is kin to the gods of the people, the Forgotten Ones knew of his cunning ways and saw him as one of their own. And that is how Fen'Harel tricked them. Our gods saw him as a brother, and they trusted him when he said that they must keep to the heavens while he arranged a truce. And the Forgotten Ones trusted him also when he said he would arrange for the defeat of our gods, if only the Forgotten Ones would return to the abyss for a time. They trusted Fen'Harel, and they were all of them betrayed. And Fen'Harel sealed them away, so they could never again walk among the people.
Yeah, it's really interesting that, yes, a lot of the Evanuris do care for the people, but it's really, the stories kind of paint like it's really Mythal and Fen'Harel who have the most compassion on the Elven people.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and Elgar'nan, because she was one of them, I think, but definitely Mythal and Fen'Harel.
Definitely. All right. So what else about him?
So it's really interesting because he, like I've mentioned, that all the other gods, like they have a couple in different names or titles. But Fen'Harel has like 11 million. So he's known as the god of betrayal, the god of rebellion, the dread wolf, he who hunts alone, lord of tricksters, the great wolf, roamer of the beyond, the old wolf, and bringer of nightmares.
Interesting.
Why do you think that's interesting?
Because Solus talks about his dreams so much.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he does. There's a line you can ask, like, it's early in the game when you're getting to know him, and you can ask him, like, do you have any friends, basically? And he's like, of course, and starts talking about all these spirits. And the Inquisitor can say something like real people friends? And he, like, gets all offended and mad at you. So, anyway, Fen'Harel, Solus annoys me in the game because he always acts superior, in my opinion, than everyone around him. But in doing this research, it made me like him a lot more. So maybe I'll romance Solus the next time I do a walkthrough. But anyway, so his great betrayal, that's like the biggest thing we need to talk about, right? So he betrays both of the clans by sealing them away in their realms, never again to interact with the mortal world, right? This is sometimes used to explain why the elven gods, especially the creators, didn't intervene to prevent the fall of Arlathan. The World of Thedas encyclopedia, the first volume, says, indeed, Fen'Harel has allegedly never been fond of the elven people and is said to have spent centuries in a far corner of the earth after his great deception, hugging himself and giggling madly in glee. I'm just picturing Solus doing that and having a little bit of a hard time, but it's a funny image.
It makes Varric's nickname all the more relevant for him.
Chuckles, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's another thing. Okay, that's another thing that suggests Varric could be the maker, right?
Right, yeah. And I give a little more credence to the theory watching Varric and Solus interact with each other. But I think it's interesting that it says that in the World of Thedas. Again, Solus could be lying about being Fen'Harel.
That's true. I don't think he is, based on his interaction with Flemeth / Mythal.
Right. Right, but we have established that Solus might not be the most reliable narrator. But he paints himself as like, yes, he doesn't care that much for the elven people, but he cares for the plight of the elves. And I wonder if that is like something that happens because of Mythal's betrayal. And like, not Mythal's betrayal, but like the betrayal of Mythal. And like her death and how that affects him, and like that was his friend, and so he wants to continue like her legacy by protecting the elven people.
I definitely see that. And I think that like his annoyance is less at the elven people and more at the gods, because the gods, especially Elgar'nan, is the one who enslaved the people, and they did nothing to take care of them except for Mythal. So I think that that's really where it comes from, instead of just like, oh, he hates everyone.
Right. And I think it's more of like, he talks about, and again, these are big spoilers for the Trespasser DLC, but he talks about in there, it's like, what I did is I betrayed my people. Like, yes, I created the Veil and I saved them from, the Evanuris. But look at them now. Like, did what I do any good? Is kind of like what Solus kind of reveals to you in the conversations in Trespasser.
Yeah, I have one of the quotes from that. So obviously, in the legends, like, it's just seen as, oh, it was easy for him to do this, right? But in reality, like, if you talk to Solus throughout the game, and get some of these like cryptic hints, like, it's obviously something that was very difficult for him. Like, it wasn't just easy to banish all these gods and to make this decision to do this, especially if he felt kinship with all of them, I'm sure. But there is a quote that says, every alternative was worse. So like any other action would have made things worse than what he did decide to do. And that conversation happens in Trespasser. So he banishes all of these gods after the murder of Mythal, which forms the Veil in his view. And that's really what results in like the destruction and the dissipation of the elven people, because it opens them up to weakness that probably wouldn't have been able to be exploited by Tevinter. Right. Which is sad. And that's what causes really the Dalish now to view Solus's or Fen'Harel's act as a betrayal. And Tamlin in Dragon Age Origin tells you that Dalish elves generally see Fen'Harel as an evil god. I don't think he's evil, but that's how they view him. And it says, calling upon him for aid or advice always has a cost. So, statues of Fen'Harel in modern Dalish camps are almost always set facing away from the camp.
Right.
And Merrill tells you in DA2 that the keepers wear rings of sylvanwood that portray Fen'Harel's betrayal. And as they do this as a reminder of the keeper's duty to protect their clan from him. Yet, Fen'Harel continually interacts with the elves in their dreams. Oh, and Solus also claims that if he hadn't banished the creators, the Evanuris, he believes that they would have destroyed the world. Right. Which I totally believe. And while they were still in power, Fen'Harel was the protector of the people. And he freed slaves and removed the Valisleen, the tattoos on their faces, for the elves that he freed from the creator's rule. So in modern times, Solus, as we know, has an immovable dedication to restore the elves' glory. This has amassed him a lot of followers across the elven populace of Thedas. No one really knows how many agents of Fen'Harel that actually are. But we do know that a lot of them are across Thedas, and some were even embedded in the Inquisition. Fen'Harel hopes to restore the people and the world to what it once was, the world of the ancient elves, even if it means destroying Thedas and its people, including modern elves. That was his initial plan, to use his orb as well as the Inquisitor's mark to remove the veil and restore the people after Corypheus died, unlocking its power. And so this comes back to Felasan, which you asked about earlier. So
right. I have one.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. It's just interesting to me because when you talk to Solus, that he's so okay with using Corypheus, but he hates the Grey Wardens.
Mm-hmm.
And he is so appalled. I did this conversation today. He is so appalled at what the Grey Wardens try to do in Inquisition. Like, the anger is like this form of righteous anger, and you have no idea where it comes from.
Yeah.
And it is kind of just out of nowhere. Like, he just says, how dare they, search out these old gods and other things like that. So it's just interesting to me that he would do that. He would use Corypheus, even though he's not an old god, but he would utilize the Darkspawn in his own way.
Right. Well, I think that's probably why he's offended at the Grey Wardens, because how dare they do something he was going to do, essentially.
Right. I also think about it that Grey Wardens, kill the old gods, and there is this theory that the Forgotten Ones and the old gods are the same.
Oh, yeah.
And so he is just kind of pissed that they're killing his friends and his compatriots.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I don't really think that Fen'Harel would care that much about it.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I would have to do more research into the conspiracy, right. The head canon.
So let's continue for our last little points.
Sure. I have one more thing to talk about with Fen'Harel. So, before he decided to work with Corypheus, Fen'Harel had worked with Felasan, Briala's friend, to take control of the Alluvion network in order to accomplish his plan to restore the people. And so in The Masked Empire, this is a major spoiler for the book, so skip ahead like a minute if you're still reading it. But when Felasan becomes really close friends with Briala and she's in need, Felasan betrays Solus to help her. And so he gives the Alluvions to Briala to help the Elves of Orlais. And in retaliation, the Dread Wolf kills Felasan and personally takes the mirrors back from Briala. And that's kind of how the book ends.
And which kind of sets up where he is at in Trespasser. I think it's so interesting. Another point that I don't think we talked about is there's often a distinction between Mythal and Flemeth and Solus and how they work, in that we're not necessarily clear that if Solus is kind of like a possessed body like Flemeth is.
Yeah.
Because he talks about how he slept and then awoke.
Okay, here are two things I have to say. He talks about, I just woke up, basically. That's how he presents it. I'm the Dread Wolf and I did all these things, but I'm not this great betrayer. I just woke up and then I helped the Inquisition. When he was doing all this crap, before the Inquisition really happened, he made these plans with Corypheus, he killed Felasan, he acquired all these agents, all this stuff. So, number one. Number two...
But he was speaking to elves in his dreams.
Okay, but
in the dreams.
still, my point stands. Number 2, I find this really interesting, and this next point is why I don't believe that Fen'Harel is just like inhabiting the body of this elf called Solus. I think that they are either the same, or that Solus's body and name are an extension of Fen'Harel. And that's because the word Solus in the Elven language means pride. And I think that that is Fen'Harel's weak point, is his pride.
Definitely. I mean, you see that in all kinds of trickster gods. Their weakness is their pride.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we take a break here and
for
come
sure.
back and talk about our person to talk about this week. Hey, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about a NPC that we're going to highlight, a non-player character or side character that you might encounter, but you might not know a lot about. And so, Shelby, who are we talking about today?
Yeah, today we're talking about Marathari. She is the keeper of the Sabre clan, which is the clan of the Dalish warden from Dragon Age Origins. And she's the keeper of Meryl's clan. So she shows up in both Origins and Dragon Age 2. So she was the keeper of the Sabre clan, like I just mentioned. They kind of traveled all over. First they're in Ferelden, and then they end up over in the Free Marches. So Duncan brings back the Dalish warden, well, before she's a warden, back to the camp. That's kind of how it all begins, if you choose that origin. And basically what happens is the hero and Tamlin find a mirror in the woods. We know now from hindsight it's probably an Illuvion, and she gets sick. And so Tamlin goes missing. Duncan goes back with the Dalish hero, and so Marathari is the one that heals them, kind of saves the day, but it ends up that the mirror has infected them with the dark spontae, and so that's how that origin becomes a Grey Warden. So she doesn't really have a lot to do in Origins. Like, that's the end of the story for her in Origins, but she comes back in Dragon Age 2. And basically what happens is Hawk and her family and Aveline are about to get killed by freaking Darkspawn, and Flemeth saves them. If Hawk will do Flemeth a favor. So the favor is Hawk must deliver an amulet to Keeper Marathari, and then the latter, Marathari, asks Hawk to perform a ritual involving Meryl. So this is like weird, right? Well, the ritual involves resurrecting Flemeth should she meet her death at the hands of the Warden from Origins. After the ritual is finished, Marathari asks Hawk to take Meryl back to Kirkwall and doesn't specify why. It later turns out that Marathari sends Meryl away because Meryl, of course, has been trying to repair the Illuvion for years. And we know, if you finish playing DA2, that Meryl never really stops her obsession with the Illuvion. So Marathari continues to discourage Meryl from her attempts to fix the Illuvion. And ultimately, Marathari is also contacted by Ariani, who is a Dalish elf, and she is the mother of Fen'Harel. So Marathari identifies Fen'Harel as a Somniari, a dreamer who can affect the Fade and the people in it. And that's how how Hawk goes into the Fade and all of that. I think that's really interesting when it's like thinking about its connection to Solus. I don't know if there is a connection to Solus there, but I think that Fen'Harel and Solus would be friends. Yeah. But anyways, so Keeper Marathari, that's she's involved in Origins and DA2. It's a little bit about her. We don't know much about her background. We obviously know that she became the Keeper, and she was first to the previous Keeper, and she was actually married to the second, and his name was Serral. And at that time, they lived in a remote part of the Frostbacks. And in the winter of 882 Blessed, they were attacked by Avar warriors, and her husband was killed. And the Keeper was really badly wounded, along with other Dalish hunters. So Marathari ordered the clan to go into the lowlands of Ferelden, which is where she entered the forest in search of the Witch of the Wilds. But we don't know if she found her. We can assume. But so shortly after Marathari reunited with her clan, the Keeper died of his wounds, and the Avar tribe was killed by Sylvans. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And so we know that comes from the World of Thedas, Volume 2. So that's a little bit about Marathari. We don't know a lot about her, but she's kind of an important character when you think about, like, Thedas existing still as a world that's not overcome by darkspawn. You know, like, she's the one that helps heal the potential hero of Ferelden. She's the one that her end of the bargain is what gets Hawk not killed by darkspawn. So I think that's interesting that she's so connected in that way, and it makes me wonder if she would come back. I don't know if she could come back, but anyway.
See, and that makes me think that perhaps the Keepers of the Dalish do know that Flemeth is Mythal reincarnated.
Yeah.
A possession. There's a possession going with Mythal.
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, I remember in DA2, like, Marathari mentions to Hawk that, like, she's in the debt of Flemeth, but she never says what it is.
Right. It's interesting. All right, are there any other closing thoughts you have for us?
No, that's all I have.
All right, then. We will see y'all next week on the Dragon Age Lorecast. Thanks for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. As always, you can find us on Twitter at DA Lorecast. If you have any lore questions, topics to unpack, or side character suggestions, email them to us at dalorecast@gmail.com. The Dragon Age Lorecast is a part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club. You can join the Robots Radio Network Discord by clicking the link in our episode description. If you enjoyed our show, we'd love it if you'd subscribe and give us a review. See you next time.
Have you ever wanted to deep dive into the lore and stories behind all your favorite Marvel movies? Then do we have the show for you. I'm Captain Shenko.
And I'm Psych88. Join us as we dissect the media megalith that is the MCU. We'll talk about the origin stories, the fights, and everything in between.
The MCU Lorecast releases on all major podcasting platforms on Mondays as part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club and can be found on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.